Building a company where you focus on hiring moms is simply badass. Cara Saven is the owner and operator of Cara Saven Wall Designs, a business-to-consumer and business-to-business wallpaper supply company that's been in operation in South Africa for 17 years. She started the business when she first had her child and realized her role as a retail buyer for a large corporation was no longer an option if she wanted to watch her daughter grow. She cashed in her pension and spent the first 10 years as a sole proprietor. In 2017, she rebranded, hired a team, which of course was other moms, and took her foot off the proverbial brake. It was time to hit the accelerator. The company expanded into the US and Holland, and by the end of 2019, has operations in Singapore, Australia, India, and most recently, the UK. She is a force, absolutely brilliant. She's been married to Marvin for 23 years, has 2 kiddos, Indiana, who's 18, and Myra, who's 15. She's also a beach bum and a hiker, and luckily lives in Cape Town. She finds her creativity within business and meeting like-minded women who have juggled their way to success as well. She won the 2021 Sanam Woman of the Future Award, and in the same year won the Car Jewish Achiever Award. She's also been on multiple magazines, and I am so excited to share my conversation with Cara. All right, Cara, welcome. I am so very excited to have you on today. And before we actually jumped on this Zoom, I was stalking your website a little bit and all of the different wallpaper designs, and I am just obsessed. I sent a few to my sister, actually, who's a designer, and she's currently doing my house. And I think that, and I'm excited for you to tell your story in a minute, but to her, as a designer and an artist, she is the person who is like looking up to you and saying, oh my God, I didn't know something like this was even possible, right? So thank you for being an inspiration to her and opening up her eyes to what she can do with her craft. But, I'd love to hear a little bit about from you how you got started in this highly niche industry.
Okay, brilliant. And I think often you don't, when you start a business, you have no idea where it's actually going to lead you. And I would never ever have imagined that this is the business I would have ended up in, and I couldn't have conceived of it without, I guess, the process. So when I had my first child, I was at the time a buyer for Woolworths, which is our version of Marks and Spencer here in South Africa. So it's a really like kind of quite high quality retail store. One of the biggest retail stores here in South Africa. I think at the time it was around 300 branches around South Africa. And I loved my job, absolutely loved what I was doing. I was a buyer for women's footwear, which is, every woman's dream is to go on buying trip shopping for shoes. And my daughter came along, and I really was not expecting to be maternal at all. I thought I'd go back to full-time 9-to-5 corporate work, and no, I held her in my arms, and there was just no way I was handing her over to someone else. And so, I kind of, for 1 year of my life, it's the only year of my life I've never not worked. Although having said that, when someone has a newborn baby and they tell you they don't work, they are lying through their teeth, I guess. It's the hardest year of your life. But after that first year of learning how to be a mom, I had to go back to work for my sanity, for, my husband and my financial situation. And I looked around me and my skill set, and I was like, okay, what can I do to make money? And I had dabbled in photography as a hobby. So I picked up my camera and I went and I knocked on the doors of a bunch of different types of businesses. I mean, really, literally, from people that made fudge to people that made till rolls and I said to them, can I come into your factory? Can I come into your working operations? And can I take photographs that you can then use as artwork, either for your marketing purposes or in your head office? And the reason I didn't want to charge them up front is because I wasn't confident in my skill set. I wasn't a particularly good photographer, but I had a decent eye. So I took their photographs and they would say, okay, we like this one, we like that one. And over the years, that developed into me starting to print those images for them onto different types of media. And I'd have to offer them the options. You can print it on a canvas or as a framed print. And then I discovered wallpaper. And it had just entered into the kind of decor industry as a option for what to put on your wall. And when I say entered, I mean, it had always been there, but it hadn't really been there in the kind of way that we started playing with it at that time, which was about 16, 17 years ago, where we would turn artworks into murals and we would transform a wall into now what looked like almost like something scenic. And I loved the medium. I loved the fact that you could take something and make it large scale. And so I realized that photography was only just a small part of that. And I actually didn't even love photographic images as murals. I loved what I was starting to see in Europe, which was old vintage paintings and old vintage prints being turned into designer luxury wallpaper. And that's really when we started to get traction in our market. And we kind of started becoming well known as the guys that did beautifully custom designed and printed wallpaper. And then in about the end of 2019, we took the concept to America and to Holland. And since then, we have got branches in Singapore and Australia, the UK, and now India. So all the design work is done in South Africa. We've got a brilliant design team here. Every single wallpaper you buy from us is custom designed for your wall size and your permutation. And we'd send the files across at the click of a button to a printer anywhere in the world. So no long lead times, everything's kind of no stock. It's a beautiful business model.
I love it. And it's cool because you got to I suppose test the waters a little bit, and then it's nothing in business is accidental. I know that sometimes, I'll hear women talking about their journey and their story and like, oh, I just accidentally fell into, and it's like, well, no, you didn't. You worked really hard. And then it just so happened that along the way, you found something you were passionate about and it was a viable business. And then you figured it out, right? And
100%. I mean, nail on head, because a lot of people assume that you've got to figure out the whole thing right there and there in order to start, when in actual fact, you just got to start. And then the next day you learn something new and it takes you a little bit there. And then the next day you learn something new. And then a customer says something to you. And slowly over time, you start to build this model, which we ourselves are still constantly tweaking.
Yeah. And that's what I love so much about your story is that you just kept taking action without having a perfect plan. And that so often just holds so many people back, thinking you have to have it all figured out. And it's like, and you just said it, we're still tweaking. I'm still tweaking. Like, you're always tweaking. That's the point of business and the ability to look ahead and innovate. And then the economy now is even forcing us to constantly pivot and really think about how are we doing business and what will things look like moving forward. And then what's next sound like, feel like, look like. And so and another thing I'd love for you to chat about, if you don't mind, is as you started and just initially started taking photographs, right? Like knowing intuitively that you had to do something, but it wasn't going back to corporate because your priority was being a mom and having that level of balance, which again is a word I typically don't love because there's really no such thing as balance. It's kind of a load of crap, right? But knowing that you wanted to build something that worked better for you and your family, what were some of the early struggles that you dealt with, whether it was a bit of imposter syndrome, I think, in the beginning there, and thinking of how you were going to charge for this as to when the company began to grow, what were some things that stick out to you, perhaps, that looking back were really monumental in terms of either a stepping stone or a lesson?
So, I mean, I worked as a sole proprietor for 10 years. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want to take on the risk of somebody else's salary. And I didn't yet have the time required to start to build a company. So for 10 years, I was a master of all, I was a jack of all trades and a master of none kind of thing. But the biggest challenge in those 10 years was just time. It was just finding time to do what I needed to do in order to keep growing. Like that was my biggest thing. I remember sitting at children's school galas and just on the computer, the only mother around on a computer, and then like my daughter looking up at her, like missed her race. Just constant, like those kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
But when my oldest daughter was 10 years old, I just had this really deep gut feel that I had something bigger here that I needed to put my foot on the accelerator of. I was very clear. It was like a bit of an epiphany. I was like, okay, I've done 10 years sole proprietorship. I've taken no risk. It's time to put my foot on the accelerator, take it off the brake, and to start to trust other people with this vision that I've got. And then so that was the start of hiring people and just trusting that I'd done enough groundwork that I was going to be able to have something that had momentum and that didn't need cold calling, which I'd been doing for like maybe the first 5 or 6 years. And then it becomes a very different animal. Then it becomes, how to manage a team and how to make sure that there's a sales funnel and how to make sure the website and branding and all of this kind of stuff. So I've been doing that now for about 7 years. And I have to say the amount of freedom that I've managed to free up for myself by delegating to other people means that I've got this incredible business that does actually run in many respects itself. And I'm just doing the stuff that I love, which when you start out, you just don't have the luxury to do. You have to do everything. And now I do what I love to do, which is to design and the marketing, and other people are doing the stuff that they love to do, but is I love to do.
And that's sometimes the best part, right? Is like going from that, having to do all of the things, love it, hate it, doesn't matter, to, oh my gosh, I actually have the freedom to be creative again. Because, and I don't know about you, but before, when I first started my business and before I hired help, I was hitting this point and inflection point of like, okay, I really want to grow, but I don't know if I can afford to hire help. And then, so there's that like a little bit of conundrum. And then I was so burnt out that I didn't even see how I could grow because I was so focused on all the little things that drained the life out of me. And so, that's such a common experience, especially with women that I've seen. Yeah. And having the confidence that like, you know what, no matter what, I've got conviction that yes, this is going to work. And oh, by the way, I'm so qualified to do it, even though you don't always know 100% how, you're standing behind that why belief and then the vision. And so for you, and what I think is important for everyone listening to also recognize is you did this for 10 years prior to even hiring and growing and expanding. And so that was 10 years of incubating, 10 years of perfecting and fine tuning. And that's another thing that no one talks about. Everybody sees this like big, beautiful business and what you're doing, of which is extremely intimidating, especially by creatives, right? Because the idea of running an organization with a team and staff, especially you're global, like that is its own logistical thing, right? And I'm at a loss for words this morning, apparently, but it's a whole different thing. And so, to take it from that, and then all of a sudden, and now you're a global company. First, I want to hear about like who was your first hire, and how did you know that seat, right? The right butt in the right seat. Was it the right butt in the right seat, or was it just someone who was convenient? Because I made that latter mistake first, and not really knowing how the hell to run a business because nobody shows you how to do that. That's like trial by fire, right? And so the first hire, but then also I'd love for you to talk about your very unique team.
Right. So one of the things I want to say is that I have built this in a way that suits me. So I have not done this according to the book or to how another person has done it, be it male or female. I have built something that makes complete sense to me and allows me to sleep at night. So I've built this as risk-free as possible. I don't like taking on debt. I've built it in such a way that each time I make a move, I'm completely comfortable to take that move. It just makes complete sense to me. It's almost like a step. So when my first hire was someone I was already working with. She was working as my account manager at my printer because I outsource, my printing. And I said to her, if you ever leave here, you will be my first hire. Now, I said that to her 2 years before she became my first hire because there was just this absolute, complete understanding of how we work. She understood my standards. She got them and she met them. And the minute she had her second child, the company she was working for actually didn't really allow her the kind of flexibility that she needed. And it was like, okay, that's kismet. But she was also so open to being hired on the kind of terms that I was comfortable with, which is, okay, come work for me. I'll pay you kind of like a half-day salary. You'll get profit share from everything that we do together because I'm going to expect you to work harder than you would work at somebody else, but I want you to benefit from that. So I kind of took the risk out of it for myself, but she was able to benefit on the upswing of it. She's still with me. She's still like my absolute 2IC. She's the I always say she is literally the engine room behind this business. And from her, I just kind of realized that the people that can take time and bend it are mothers. They don't have time for chit chat. There's no water cooler talk. We got to get this done. I've only got so many hours till the child needs to be fetched. And that ended up being the kind of people that we ended up hiring in this business. And it has been by far one of our strongest aspects to how we built this business. Because women and women with children understand that a phone call will probably need to be taken while the kids are in the back. And COVID really actually helped us with respect to that, because it kind of blew open the door of this fantasy that none of us have private lives, Right. And we were constantly trying to cover up for that before COVID. Mm-hmm. We were trying to often, there was a sense of, oh, well, we don't have offices. I never wanted offices. Why do we need offices for? We are an online business. Everyone can see our online. If they need samples, we send them samples. If they need to come and make an appointment, we can make an appointment. So it's kind of like, as I said, this business has really built itself around what I'm comfortable with and what the women that work for us and one man comfortable with. And I just think that it's just worked out so well because of that. We've kind of stayed true to who I am and who everyone else is in the company.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that the reason your business is so successful is because you did do it your way, right? For you, and it works for you. And so it never feels like this constant resistance. And I think sometimes we can fall into the trap of contorting our business or our growth to all of the outside opinions or what we think we should do. Because often, and again, it's I think sometimes that confidence thing or feeling like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I should listen to all these other people. But if we just listen intuitively to exactly what we want, what works for us, that's how we accelerate. And what I think is so cool too is the fact that you hired and your team is moms. And there's been, and there still is, especially in the States, I don't know about where you are, such a stigma around moms and working moms that, oh, they'll be distracted or not as dependable, or what kind of time off are they going to need? And the reality is I'll take a mom all day long over someone who hasn't experienced the extreme need, to your point, to bend time, but to be able to multitask, to get shit done, to care deeply about someone else. I mean, that in itself teaches you so many things. And there's not a day that goes by, and I'm not a mom myself, but I have such an incredible amount of admiration for women who are moms and working, because they're doing things and compartmentalizing in ways that I can't wrap my head around. And I think it's just so cool. And it speaks to how dynamic women really are and their ability to handle multiple things at once, where I think often men just aren't built that way, right? And it's nothing against men, but I know for a fact, if I give my husband 3 things at once, there's like an immediate shutdown, right? So
Only. And my husband's like, write it down. I'm like, I don't have time to write it down. Internalize.
Exactly. Yeah. I find, he says, write it on a Post-it. And so I'm like, trying to find time to write it on a Post-it and then send a WhatsApp and then a reminder. And it's like, what the F, and they're very linear often. And so, the ability and that probably, and I'd love to hear your insight on that is if you, do you think part of how you've grown in the way that you've grown and at your pace has been due to the people on your team are more interested in not only getting shit done, but truly contributing to that mantra of your company versus having some players on a team who were there to just get shit done, collaborate, and leave.
100%. And the other thing is that often a woman that has had a child or children, and I'm going to speak about this from my own perspective, because this is very, very much part of it, is that when I had a child, I had no idea that I was going to feel the way that I felt in terms of the level of responsibility to that child, right? And so almost the choice of my ambition was removed from me. I could no longer, it was almost like my ambition could no longer really be a factor in my life because I had this huge responsibility to this child. But when I discovered that I actually could do something while still being a caregiver, and I could do it really well, and I could contribute to society, and I could contribute financially to our home, my level of ambition got so much higher than it was when I was at a corporate company. And I've seen that with the women that come and work for us. There is a hunger almost to prove themselves because of what might have been taken away from them. And I still have that in me. There's almost like, I don't want to say a resentment and an anger that fuels that ambition around the fact that only, women are the only ones that are really biologically able to kind of have children. And we still are so restricted in some ways to continue the pursuit of our ambitious life. But it is a factor we have to acknowledge. And if you are somebody that your sense of self-worth is very much tied up in what you do, not only as a mother. I mean, mine is not that tied up in motherhood. Mine is very much tied up in my career. You often find that those women come hungrier than maybe a man would.
Yeah, I love that. And it was so beautifully said. And that's powerful. And you doing what you're doing, right? And having that burning desire to grow your business and be ambitious and have women on your team who are, you're giving other women permission to not only do it, but proving that it's possible, which I think in itself is the most beautiful and brilliant thing. Because again, there's so many women that I talk to that hold themselves back because they can't see their way out, or they don't believe they're able to X, Y, and Z. And so to know that not only can it be done, but it can be done in a way where you're not compromising. You're not compromising, and you're showing your kids. And this is another thing that I love about women who are out there crushing it with kids is like, you are showing your kids the way and what can be done and giving them that role model to look after and model and aspire to be. And even looking back when I was a little girl, I so looked up to my best friend's parents. They ran a business and they weren't around that much, but when they were, it mattered. It was, they were fully present. They were at every softball game. And then we went to the store with them. We went to their office, and like to be able to see them in their zone to me was just something that I always like, wow, one day I want to do that too. And it just created this really cool, dichotomy of being, it was not my immediate family, but it felt like it, and being involved in that, but then being able to look up and see what was possible outside of my immediate home, and then having conviction in all of the things that they were able to really grow through. Because I also saw the struggles, right? Like it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say, like, I mean, that is that I'd hate for you to paint a picture where I'm like fully present with my children. And you know what I mean? I would say that I was probably more distracted as a mom when my kids were younger, especially in those first 10 years, than someone that went to, a 9-to-5 job, because when they came home, they were able to switch off. When you're running your own business, especially in those like first kind of real slog years, I was really distracted, like really. It was also the place that I felt the most empowered. I didn't feel empowered at bath time when the kids were screaming. So to check my phone and reply to an email made me feel more empowered in that moment, that I could try and quell the chaos. So it certainly was not easy, and it was messy, and it was, at times really challenging, because your ambition, if it's there, it sometimes feels, a lot easier to focus on that than on domesticity. That's, for me, domesticity just doesn't come as easily, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, 100% to that.
Trying to do that juggle and trying to be everything to everyone, be a good mom and be a good businesswoman and be a good wife and stuff like that. It's such a challenge. It really, really is.
Well, and I think, look, like the mess is the part that matters. Like, it is messy, and that's how else are you going to do it? And I think embracing that over anything else is the best part. And, and it's funny that you say, like, I was, when you were feeling like you were in your zone, right? You weren't distracted, you weren't present, but again, like looking back, when I was seeing them working and being distracted, not necessarily paying to us, but being present, like, to me, that was the coolest part. It wasn't the part that they were like at this, it was like watching them do the thing and observing, right? Where I think, again, you don't seem to be the person that does this, but I've heard moms like say, oh, I have mom guilt, I'm not paying attention, or I'm working on an email.
Oh, I totally had it. Like just you choose the thing that you often are better at because it feels better for you, but the mom guilt it's huge. It's absolutely huge.
And it's a natural thing, but you're showing them what it's like to be a boss. And I think that is power in itself. And so for what it's worth, from experiencing it when I was younger and now observing it with my friends who are doing that and feeling that pull of like, holy shit, this is messy. I don't feel like I'm accelerating at anything, right? Or if I am, something else is definitely falling off the rails. It's like, well, no, it's not. Maybe it's supposed to be that way. And maybe that's how we build resilient kids. Like, that can deal with adversity and deal with life. It's not supposed to be perfect, because if it were, who would we be raising? And so I think that is huge. And I just wanted to make a note of it, because I know that there's so many women who do grapple with that pull.
Agreed. And I also think as well, like the one thing you said as well, which was, I was just thinking, you were speaking about how some people, like they feel as though they're not making any kind of progress, and it can be sometimes really disheartening. Like if I look back on the last 17 years, a lot of the progress was made simply by just not stopping. It was just like every day, just carrying on. And it often felt like I wasn't making any progress. And then suddenly you turn around and 10 years later, you realize, oh my gosh, I've got actually like this huge body of work that I can rah about, and then 2 years after like branding, oh my gosh, we've been in like the front cover of 3 magazines. And often when you've got your head down and you're doing it, it doesn't feel like you're making much progress. And then suddenly you put your head up one day and you realize, flip up, I've actually done something here. And for me, the key there is just consistency. It's just like every day, it's like doing something, just moving forward. And eventually there's compound interest,
Yeah, I love that. And it's that positive progress, and just every single day, not quitting, not stopping.
It's just the not quitting. Just not quitting.
Keep going. Yeah. And it's so true. Like when you're in the grind, in it every single day, and just doing things, you can't see necessarily the progress. And then and I'm sure this, you can feel this way, is like sometimes I blink and there goes 2 years, and I feel like, what the hell did I do in those 2 years? But then you actually look back, or for me, I have my team sometimes point out to me when I'm like all in my head, and they're like, well, wait a minute, like these are all the things that we actually accomplished. And for me, I actually forget. Like, I don't even realize sometimes what's been accomplished because I'm so much in it, but then looking ahead. And so it's important to recognize those celebrations along the way, because it's those little things that you do every single day that amount to a big result at the end of the day. So yeah, and beautiful point. So before we end, is there any last message that you would love to share with the women listening about anything about being an entrepreneur as a mother, or your business in general, any lesson that you've learned?
I think the last thing I'd love to end on is what you mentioned earlier, which is imposter syndrome. And I think so many women and so many men, in fact, most people have imposter syndrome in some way or form. But I think that if I can connect that concept of imposter syndrome with what I spoke about earlier, which is that all of us have this unique thing, this unique talent, this unique set of skills, that if we just follow our gut feel around what we think we're good at and work really, really hard at it, we often find ourselves in a place we just had no idea we were going to get to. And to accept that along the way, you are constantly going to feel like an imposter. It's just part and parcel of the journey. But if you just keeping on, and just, as you said, just never quit, you just do somehow find yourself in a place 5 years later, 6 years later, really good at something, because you just never quit at it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that imposter syndrome is so good at trying to take you off that seat. Yeah. Just sitting there and doing it. It's like, what's the point? I'm not, and it would be a terrible thing to listen to that voice inside you. It upsets me that so many women have when they actually have got so much potential in them.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we are all so much more powerful than what we tend to give ourselves credit for. And so I think, if there's anything, it's brave it till you make it and keep going. Don't stop. Like, just believe the process. So thank you so much for everything that you shared. So valuable, and so many brilliant points. Until next time, my friends, continue to be courageous.